for your patience. I'm running a technology company called Dynamic Yield out of our Singapore office for APAC. We are based out of New York. We are basically a technology company. We develop what we call a personalization stack. So this is a solution that modifies any aspect of your app or web depending on who is looking at it. When you think about right now how we attract the traffic and how we work with customers, this is our current logic. I was previously one of the founders of the Lazada marketplace and also one of the starters of Shopee, which I'm sure you know because we are quite big in Indonesia. So this is the way we traditionally thought in e-commerce. We would say, I want to attract traffic. I want to actually bring them to my site. So I would have a very, let's say, amazingly developed performance marketing team. I would actually go, divide it, and I would have a lot of technology on the traffic acquisition side. So when it comes to Facebook, when it comes to GDN, I would use and bring all that traffic. But once they come to my site, they would actually see the same average website for everyone. If you think about it, your website is not changing depending on who is looking at it, which is a huge missed opportunity. Now, at this point, we spend $92 in APAC as a whole for every dollar we spend actually attracting and converting that user technologically. So showing them the right thing when they come to the site itself. And I assure you, given the current e-commerce craze in Indonesia, that number is much higher in Indonesia. So it's probably around 200 times more than on the website itself. Now, think about your average user. Think about you're in Indonesia and you're actually running a website. We usually build our website for the average user. The average user, our average basket size could be 100,000 rupiah. We have certain type of users coming mostly from Jakarta. But when you drill down into your users, who is looking at your website? Who is downloading your app? You have very different types of customers on very different locations who will actually probably respond to very different price points, very different products, very different kind of color codes, menu order. So to give you an example, Zalora is one of the platforms using Dynamic Yield and running their whole platform on our technology. If you enter in Zalora, if you download their app with an iPhone 10 in the center of Jakarta here, or if you download the same app for the first time in East Lombok from a, let's say, low-resolution Xiaomi phone, when the user here is on a sunny day and the user in Lombok is on a rainy day, the kind of product points, the kind of price points, the kind of recommendation logic, the kind of color codes you will see are slightly different. Why is that? Because we use lookalike audiences to be able to tell this type of user is likelier to respond to this kind of stimuli. Now, most platforms at this point are working having the same static site for every user that comes. So that means that my, let's say, center of Jakarta iPhone 10 user, or let's say my, more rural kind of customer will see the same experience. They will have the same, let's say, checkouts. They will have the same kind of experience when they go through the site. Now, how do we actually go and actually build a platform that can take that into account and activate it in real time? So Dynamic Yield does two things, in short. First one is we are installed in every touch point of the customer, from ads to emails to push notifications to apps to web. And we bring all that data into one into one DMP, basically, into one database that stores information in raw format. We can even be on point of sale. In many platforms in the US, like Urban Outfitters, we are even in offline stores. Now we bring all that information into one place so we can understand each customer regardless of where they are. Now once we have this information, we can start actually showing them what works for each one of them. So that banner, for example, let's say that banner will not perform based on a lookalike audience of this user who is coming from, let's say, a rural area. This user clicked on a different ad, so that kind of recommendation logic will just not perform with this type of user. Now, there's many platforms using us all across the world. We started in APAC 1 year ago. We already have, let's say, JD, Zalora, Sephora, Watson's Group, several other local customers using us. And we are starting an office in Indonesia next month. So it would definitely be nice chatting with you guys. And of course, many others all across the world. Our bread and butter, it's e-commerce, but Dynamic Yield is a personalization script that first started being used in newspapers. So the funny story about the start of this company is the New York Times was our first customer. Now, 7 years ago, the New York Times had an existential problem. They had these new millennials, which, speaking of millennials, 7 years ago was not such a big cliche as it is today. And they had the problem that their behavior was completely different. These millennials were coming and they only wanted to see video. They didn't want to see op-eds, they didn't want to see full text articles. So they basically contacted our CEO and he started his third company, Dynamic Yield, which would allow them to, in real time, activate the data, guess where the user was coming from, and change the homepage to show much more video to those millennials. Now, this improved the conversion quite a lot. Now, of course, eventually, what we saw, and especially me being from Lazada and Shopee background, is that the more complex your interaction with your customer, the more you can extract out of personalization. When you think of e-commerce, the funnel is very long. You're identifying the user, you're running ads, you're bringing them for the first time to your site, they are browsing few PDPs, they are going into the category page, they are leaving, you're sending them an email, they are downloading your app, you're sending them a push notification. So each one of these touch points is an opportunity to create value that we drive through Dynamic Yield. So I wanted to show you some of the examples of the most successful campaigns. We call them experiences that our customers are running all across the world. Now, this is what the leading platforms are doing. So just giving you a few examples on the funnel. So when we get again into our example before of the rural customer and the city customer, you imagine that you enter through the phone to your own website. What is the first thing you usually see? Is the big kind of banner display, the hero banner that you are showing on top of your website that you are so used to. Now, this banner is a huge opportunity to show the customer that we are actually doing something that works for them, and that is we are identified where they come from, the platform they were, the cookies they have, and the kind of product they are likelier to purchase. Now, many platforms actually go and modify that big hero banner based on all the factors that I mentioned before. If it's a sunny day, you can actually make it a much more sunny, jolly kind of banner. If you are actually a man or a woman based on the kind of banner you're coming from, we will show you something that subconsciously you are likelier to click on. This can have actually up to a 32% uplift in terms of CTR. So basically, they are 1/3 likelier to click on any of these banners because it just reflects what the customer is all about. There's many other examples of many other platforms all across the world that are running amazingly complex campaigns that are fully automated by Dynamic Yield when it comes to personalizing each element of the page. So this is, let's say, a large platform that is using Dynamic Yield in the US, and they are basically personalizing this for users as recommended by Dynamic Yield for the top segment, graphics segment, accessories segment, dresses segment, depends on what the user shows affinity for. They will see a totally different homepage. Now, the idea here is that the more I know about you, the more information you'll see and the distribution of the page will change. Like we will see later, when we get even more information about the user, we start seeing automatic recommendations in the middle show. Now, this only happens when we know enough about the user to make a guess. Now, this brings us to the topic of recommendations. Now, recommendation algorithms nowadays are a commodity. Almost everyone can even develop their own recommendation algorithm. The key is not the algorithm itself or how it is developed, because there's amazing best practices on it. The key is which algorithm to show to who at which point of the funnel. Now, what Dynamic Yield allows is to inject it, test it for each type of customer in real time. And of course, another use case is to testing when our designers don't agree on what is the best kind of user or the best kind of design to go forward, we can use this to actually get scientific proof on it. An example for this was one of our largest customers in Europe that wanted to use one dog for all their display advertising. This is like a very famous European and US platform. And they wanted to use one, so they basically, each one of the person of the management, so let's say the CFO, sales, returns, another salesperson put their dog there on the middle of the homepage, and they saw who would actually interact more with each one of them. Now, Dynamic Yield was basically changing the order and making them bigger and smaller based on how people was interacting with the dogs. They also did a lot of PR with it, which was amazing. And after a while, let's say in 3 days, we could see that Bergen actually was the best by far. So actually the CTR was in real time, was double of the next one. and dynamic yield chose it as the best, and changed all the traffic allocation to that dog. They ran several campaigns after that with that information, and actually worked and performed very, very well. Once we start knowing more about the customers, of course, we go way beyond just content. We go way beyond banners or any kind of designs. We go into fully individualized homepages. So this is an example of a very large Southeast Asian, let's say, retailer that is running an area of their site that is fully personalized to each user. So what they're doing is, first of all, they are showing only the categories that the user is likely to click on, and right below, they're using what we call a full user affinity infinity scroll. So what they're doing is they're organizing the products for each user in real time on the homepage when they know enough about them. Now, the logic here is if I don't know enough about you as a user, you will see the default experience. You'll see something like this when you enter to my site. You'll see banners. You'll know what my brand is all about, what you can find. Whenever you look, let's say, at 5, 6 product pages, I start knowing much more about you. Whenever you either add something to the cart, I am able already to give you a pretty strong infinity scroll of recommendations. So the experience would change to show you less banners, but more on the personalization, exactly based on what you are likely to buy. Now, this is based on 2 logics. One is lookalike, based on other customers who have done something like you. And the second one is just pure pattern recognition, based on the colors you like, on the brands you like, based on the price point you usually click on and add to the cart, and of course, purchase. Another example is at any point on the homepage or the category page, you are always showing messages that you cannot see it clearly, but any kind of data or loyalty information is always with dynamic yield. So we have several partners. In this case, you will have Sephora, who are running all their CRM data is also on the dynamic yield DMP. So even if you didn't log in, if you ever logged in the past or connected any device, we know at which loyalty tier you are. We know which kind of, let's say, skin color you have, which is quite important for makeup. We know all the necessary steps to actually remind you how many points you have left for the next tier level, and to actually show you all that information. We can actually tell you, you are only this amount of money away from the next tier. That will give you certain benefits. The benefits we will show you are based on who you are. So again, we will personalize an A/B test per user, each one of the elements in real time. Now, the way we would do this is quite straightforward. So basically, this is around dynamic yield in the backend, and everything is a variable that marketeers do without the need for absolutely any testing at all. Let's say they don't need to know any kind of, or have any technical skills whatsoever. This is just injected for the users when it's relevant for them and when we have this CRM information. Another level, when we go one step below on the funnel, would be the category pages, which in general are highly ignored and standardized across our sites. When you look at the category page itself, especially on mobile or on mobile web, which has quite a low performance on these pages, one of the key things to do, and that is performing the best in all platforms across the world, like in this big retailer in the US who is using dynamic yield, is always being able to personalize each of the categories, subcategories, or visuals that we see for each one, for men, women, high spenders, low spenders, or any combination of them. Now, the idea is to be able to only show them the relevant information, because especially on mobile, it's much, they will churn otherwise. And of course, this leads us to the, let's say, to the king of the conversion pages, which is the PDPs, the product pages. Now, everything that is, let's say, on the product page, from optimizing, the image itself to showing the right pricing to any kind of recommendations is run by dynamic yield. So let's say one key example would be of personalization would be the recommendations you would see here. The system defines which recommendations to show, first showing 3 levels. The first one is, if I know nothing about the user who is coming to our site, and the user goes to the product page, the recommendations shown will be mostly contextual. They will basically see bought together, viewed together, any kind of popularity, or general or contextual kind of recommendations. The moment that the user already viewed any other product, especially if there are other shoes, basically we will be able to show this kind of user much more similarity and user affinity recommendations, such as the ones we were looking at just for you before. And now, of course, when we look at the top 20% of our users, those that are actually converting and buying more things, we will be able to show them predictive recommendations. So we will be able to predict based on lookalikes what they will buy after with accuracy. So again, the key is not the algorithm, it's what to show to each user in real time and letting the machine actually choose this and show us the performance. And everything I'm telling you about is actually done by a marketeer just choosing, let's say, creating different variations for recommendations on a simple backend that is then showing the performance in real time and which users are seeing which recommendations and what is performing better, while all the tests are fully automated. So Dynamic Yield is a backend that is allowing these marketeers to run all this technology and do, in 3 months, all the tests that they would do in a year. And of course, then getting all the reports, being able to get all the information. It's an extension of the previous screen. And seeing, of course, what's the winner. Now, as they are pushing me for time already, another thing is that, of course, the final one in PDPs is always, and this is especially important in Southeast Asia and in Indonesia, social proof is one of the most and the best performing use cases that we see around here. Peer reviews, the amount of people who looked at this today, last week, the reviews, is very important. But the main issue we have right now with platforms is that they are hard coding it. So they are saying, I'm always going to show here 96 people viewed this today. Now the thing is, sometimes the amount of people who viewed this today is just not impressive. Now that's why Dynamic Yield chooses in real time which number to show, chooses the most impressive one. So you would basically have on social proof, you will have purchases a day. If it's impressive, it will show it. If not, it will show the purchases during the week. If not, it will show the views of the day, of the week, of the day, let's say the 5, etc., etc. It will actually show the number that is impressive, and then it would actually get into the reviews. So purchases, views, and then reviews. Now, reviews are good as well. Of course, it depends on the type of customer. If you have certain customer who always responds to reviews, they should always see reviews. Now, this order is just chosen by marketeers, and it can be modified and tested without any product team actually touching or looking at it. And of course, we have, let's say, other promotions like the rush timers, but getting to the cherry on the top. So once we have all the information across the funnel, once we are already predicting and we already created this logic across the different steps to actually show to each customer whatever performs better, it's when our predictive engine takes over. Now, what is the predictive engine doing? I'm going to give you a real example. This is I guess you guys know Liverpool Football Club. It's the largest football, I'm a European, so I'll say football store in the world. They are running Dynamic Yield. We actually have them fly over. They were at an event of ours in Singapore last week. And this is one of their best sellers. So it's basically a football. Now, they basically have this algorithm for the recommendations, but they wanted to test which kind of algorithm would perform better for everyone when they started using Dynamic Yield. So they ran a test. This is a simplified version of it. You had a control group. You have, let's say, two different strategies. One would be all similar, all recommendations. One would be all similar plus bought together recommendations in the same widget. And they were also testing their own logic. Now, you run it for a few hours, and given their traffic, Dynamic Yield would choose the winner, which would be similar plus bought together. It beat their own strategy at 34.4%. Now, at this point, what you're doing is you are just showing the same strategy to everyone. So what Dynamic Yield would do at this point is it would just find out who is the group of users that is least satisfied with this recommendation algorithm, something that it would take you hundreds of tests to do. And finally, it would basically tell you, I found this personalization opportunity. If you click on Apply Now, what it will basically do is you are here right now. You're showing this similar plus bought together algorithm to your users. But if you actually show this different algorithm to the PDP frequent visitors, to your most avid users, which is a non-neglectable 39% of users, your actual uplift will be 54.1%. So what Dynamic Yield is doing is once you set up all your campaigns, it's running hundreds of micro tests on the back end, trying to find, let's say, these efficiencies all across the funnel. Thank you so much.